session than it is a formal meeting. Okay, so you'll be able to come in and the council will be there, people from area will be there. And you'll be able to see the material that they have to bring you up to date, and then we'll answer any questions you might have.
It says we're now streaming longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was
Go ahead.
another question that I had was whether or not you received my September 6th letter.
Yes, we do.
You did, okay.
It's on the agenda.
It's on
Yeah,
the
it's on the
agenda.
agenda.
It's part of the correspondence package for tonight.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So whenever your clock hits 7, David, you should be good to go.
6:59.
My computer clock is 3 minutes fast and I don't know how it's possible.
I guess I can set to automatically.
I mean, it should be.
No, you know, if it's- if they're not set, then it wouldn't.
Well, MGSB says they're not. They're not gonna let me do that. Professionals, I'll have to ask Lisa. That'll be my question when they present.
Okay, 7 o'clock it is. We are recording. And we're on YouTube. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this final meeting of September for the Mahone Bay Town Council. Do we have any special meetings tomorrow? No, so this will be the last one for September. Good stuff. Welcome to the folks at home who are participating with us on YouTube. And as always, when the agenda of the meeting is completed and we are ready, we will be going in camera tonight. And just before we go in camera, the citizens at home who are watching will have an opportunity to ask questions of council on any topic that is discussed tonight. Okay? We'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered tonight in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Tonight, we gather with the intent followed by the Living Peace and Friendship Treaties. We do so with respect, with cooperation, and coexistence. We'll call the meeting to order. You have an agenda that was emailed to you. What is your wish, council?
Will we do the agenda circle?
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver, on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Councillor Feeney has asked for an opportunity to very briefly speak to council.
Yes, I just like to say in reflecting the minutes of our marathon session on September 13th, I realized that I used a harsh tone and was, wasn't courteous when discussing a contentious matter with staff. It's unfortunate that the deputy CAO isn't here tonight, but I would like to publicly indicate that that I use that harsh tone, and you can disagree without being disagreeable, and we'll do better in the future. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Feeney. Let's go to the minutes of the meeting of September 13th. Councillor Carver,
I'll move they be accepted as circulated.
thank you. Seconded by Councillor Feeney. You heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the minutes of the special meeting of September 23rd.
Would they be accepted as circulated?
Thank you. Seconded again, Councillor Feeney. You heard the motion on this question. All in favor? That motion is carried as well. Thank you. We can go right on to our presentation. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Leslie McFarland, who is the new Chief Operating Officer for the MJSB. And also Lisa Bozek, who is the IT manager for the whole IT operation that MJSB provides. So, Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say really a hello and introduce myself, and Lisa will introduce herself as well. And just say, you know, we've both started just in early July and have about 3 months in now. We were able to have our first complete board meeting that we, you know, helped to coordinate yesterday. And thanks to your counselors and your mayor's support, I think, you know, we're moving in a good direction. I think we're excited about the opportunities to support you and serve you and making sure that your tax dollars go to the absolute extreme that they can to deliver services for our residents. We understand that's the goal of MJSB. We take it very seriously. So we're here to say that and to hear from you as your board members, your council members that are on our board, help to represent that for us. We have, I think, some ambitious things that we're working to do over the coming year and really embark on strategic planning with the board and make sure that we're aligned with what the three partners are looking for from the MJSB in terms of the existing services and if there would be any changes to those or any additional services or anything of those natures. So yeah, I'm excited. It's been a great summer working with the team. They're a lovely bunch, really kind group of folks who have been very helpful to onboard me. And I know they're really patient. I'm still 100% learning. So it's still a learning curve, but they've imparted lots already, and I know more and more will come. I can say that I'm really excited and thrilled to be here. Both Lisa and I are really, really happy to be back in Nova Scotia. And so it's a personal thing for us as well. So it's really wonderful. It feels like a great fit, and my family's thrilled as well. My daughter just started at Dalhousie a couple of weeks ago, first year. And so for my husband and I coming from Manitoba, you know, it's been great because we were going to leave. Our only child was going to be 2,500 kilometers away. And instead here we are, and we're, you know, an hour's drive if she has an emergency, which so far it's only been a couple, and I'm sure there'll be fewer and fewer. I'm hearing less and less from her already. But yeah, which gives us lots of time to focus on the important work of MJSB and supporting the residents of the town of Mahone Bay. So we're very thrilled to do that. So thank you for having me here. I'm more than happy to take any questions you might have. And I think there may be something that you may want me to speak about a little bit later in the meeting, perhaps. And if so, then that's great. But any questions, I'm here for you.
Thank you, Leslie.
I
Lisa.
won't say much more than what Leslie has said, other than I really enjoyed for the past 3 months, just really understanding the way the IT operations has been set up to date and how it is serving mostly your administration. And then looking forward about how we can take IT or digital transformation and help you support your residents in that. I think that's a longer term vision, but it's been really interesting for me already to understand what you're doing and then what are the opportunities coming up. And I think that, again, just to reiterate, before this meeting, I spent an hour on Lunenburg Harbor rowing, and I just, you know, pinching myself out there with the most beautiful sights. And I'm so, so happy to be home. And I just feel so lucky that I can actually be here and to be able to meet you and to do the job that I do. So I'm thrilled, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Councillor Carver.
Thanks, Lisa. Where's IT located now?
We have, our office is currently at the Blockhouse Visitor Information Center.
Oh, that's where you are.
So, but we're very mobile. We're trying, everybody, we spend the morning working on tickets and working together on different projects, and then everybody disperses in the afternoon to all the different locations.
And you're providing service to Yarmouth County,
There's a bunch of other non-partners, and Yarmouth is one of them.
Shelburne.
Town of Shelburne, and then there's, you know, Region 6, there's LCLC, there's also, which is a part of you, but there's the Home Bay Center, and there's a couple others, YMCA in Bridgewater. So there's
Councillor Perry.
If I may, so could you just give us a quick run through of the procedure if we had technical problems? We should do?
I thank you for giving me the opportunity, because I was actually speaking with Sebastian today about, you know what, people really need to know how to just create a ticket. Because what happens is that although they seem like they know a lot about IT, they can't understand your context. And they can't understand when they come to solve your problem by just looking. So when you're creating a ticket, because that's really what you should do, is help at town TOMB. So I don't know, I think that's what you guys would use as well in order to.
No, I used to just email the person who had your position before.
Right, and
And he would,
when you do that, that slows down their ability to respond to you.
Ah.
So you should absolutely, and I can make sure that that information about how to create the ticket is sent to all of you, so you get that, but it does absolutely slow your service down. So you write to the right person, which is the help at, and then when you have to describe what it is you're going through, what were you doing when such and such happened? Or what is your actual problem? And make sure you put your telephone number. And make sure that when you write your ticket, you're ready to have it solved. A lot of people, they put in tickets, I can't print, I'll be on vacation for the next week, talk to you when I get back. And tickets time starts as soon as someone enters the ticket. And then when you close it, it's very difficult to know, could it take a week to close an email ticket or a printed ticket? No, when you're ready and you're available, that's when you create your ticket. I hope that helps a little bit.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Mr. Hyde.
Just so while we've got these folks here, and I'm sorry, we haven't had a chance to talk about this, there's been a little bit of back and forth this week about special collections following the hurricane. And so we have Leslie here who could talk a little bit about what some of the other units are doing. I don't know if you mind being put on the spot to talk about that, Leslie. But yeah, it just kind of came to our attention midweek this week. It may be something council would like to do. Some of the other units have decided to do it. And I do have costs, but I'm sure you do too. So either of us can comment on what it would cost as well.
Certainly, and thank you. That's what I was alluding to, just in case you'd like to hear a little bit more about Hurricane Fiona and possible things that you can do to support residents, just depending if you're interested in this or not. So a couple things. One is the waiving of tipping fees. So I think with in the fall of 19 with Hurricane Dorian, there was a waiving of tipping fees by the town of Mahone Bay. So that means you basically covered those fees. So when someone comes across the scale with a bunch of tree debris, then we coded and charged it back to you. At that time, it didn't add up to a whole lot. It was about $150 total cost, but it does mean a lot to the people. And when they phone in and they hear that that's available, people are thrilled. So, I mean, it could be more, depending how long you want to have it open. The others are doing 3 weeks. I think we did 2 weeks the last time because we're getting more hurricanes more frequently. And so that, took a couple of weeks before the offer maybe went out to the municipalities to do that. And so there probably was a lot that went in before the free tipping fee came in place. So I might say it might cost you $500. I'm going to say, I'm just throwing it out there. If that's something that the municipality would like to do, then we can put that in place right away. We can communicate about it and get that information out there. And I think you have a Facebook page and so on. We can put it on there as well. And if people hear about it, they can pass the word as well. So that's one thing that council may want to approve. I can advise that Bridgewater and municipality of the District of Lunenburg have both decided to go ahead with that service. And then the other thing that could be arranged is we can have GE do a special collection for you. So your collection is already on Wednesdays. And so it could be either next Wednesday or the Wednesday and the following Wednesday, whichever you like. The cost for that would be about $1,300 per week. I can advise that the other two municipalities are doing a one-time. So for Bridgewater, they're doing it next week. Their collection takes Monday to Friday, so they're doing all 5 days. And municipality of the District of Lunenburg takes 2 weeks to do a full collection, and so they're doing that full collection, but it's a 2-week duration, but everybody's getting one pickup. So if you wanted to do it for next Wednesday, I pretty much need to let them know tonight or early tomorrow morning. And we get the word out tomorrow. It's Truth and Reconciliation, but I think that people would be still paying attention and so on, and it would give them enough time to prepare for the Wednesday collection, to have their bundles ready. It's no one piece of wood bigger than 100 pounds, nothing longer than 6 feet. We encourage them to bundle twigs and so on, and it's paper, leaf, yard waste bags, not the plastic. But GE is prepared to do that as long as they were here. Well, they said by tonight, but I'm sure by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, we would do them just fine. So again, that's about $1,300 for that special collection. If you want to do 1 week, if you want to do 2 weeks, it's double that. So that's just information for your decision making.
Okay, thank you.
And I can also advise, we've been sharing information across other waste sites around the province. There's a lot of people are looking at both those kinds of things being made available to their residents.
Okay,
So do we have to add another item to the agenda to?
I mean,
deal with that?
show of hands is fine as far as I'm concerned.
that would be in a
Yeah.
special, it's a special situation,
Yeah,
arguably an emergency driven situation, but.
But also, we don't need a motion. I can just
Hmm.
give them authorization, as long as there's not
Okay.
dissension amongst the
Okay.
ranks.
Do
I
we
guess.
agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, so I'll send you an email. but-
So we're going with the one-time pickup, or we're going with the free drop-off?
I think we'll do both.
For both?
The free drop off at the site, and we'll put one extra cleanup day here.
And that's consistent. So, yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. All right, if there are no other questions, let's go to our correspondence file. Item 4.1 is a letter from Mary Lou and John Croft. Comments?
That's the grant for the Ukrainian family?
Yeah.
Or the,
Yeah,
Deposit on the electricity
yes.
yeah.
and water connection.
Which to me is a question.
Do you have a question?
So
Deputy Mayor, please.
I was wondering, rather than a grant, why wouldn't it just be a waiver of the fees?
Well, I can,
Uh,
so the utilities aren't allowed to waive fees. The town actually has to grant the money to cover the utilities cost. So it can happen internally without money being given out, but it would still be a grant from the town.
It shows on the books as a grant.
Sorry.
I have a slightly different question, but I know we have a growing diaspora of Ukrainian folks in town. And I wonder if there's something we should do from a program point of view that applies to all of them. I mean, I think this is a great idea to do this. but
Yes.
There are others as well. that
Do we know how many?
I do not.
No. Or what their situation might be? Is there an organization taking responsibility for settling them?
Dylan, in the email, there's a description of deposit versus fee. That is a connection fee that we're offsetting versus a deposit that gets refunded at the end of the term. Is that, is that right? Is this essentially a damaged deposit, or is this a fee that we charge that would not be refunded at the end of someone's tenure in an apartment?
Connection fee?
Yeah, so there's a fee if it's a new connection, but it's a deposit if it's electricity, so I don't know.
Do you get,
I'll have to look into further, like.
do
what-
you
where
get the
what it's
deposit
moving
back?
into. Well, so if you're moving in and you're just a new customer, the deposit is something that I think is refundable.
Yes.
If you're setting up a new service to a property that was previously unserved or adding an additional service,
Okay.
there is
A
a
fee.
connection fee, so.
Okay.
In this case, I don't actually know the property that they're moving into, so I'm not sure if it's a new service or a new connection. But in either case, we wouldn't have to pay them the part that is refundable, I guess, or we could pay the deposit and
Well, that's
refund
what-
ourselves, yes.
Councillor Pervin.
How much do we have left in our grant fund, and would it qualify, would this situation qualify?
The balance in the grant fund is right about this amount. It's whatever was left over from the grants that you guys authorized at the last meeting. I think it was about $600. And I mean, I don't think there's anything that disqualifies this as a grant.
That would disqualify it,
Yeah,
so it could be eligible.
yeah.
So.
Well-
Go ahead. So with that in mind, I would support that we use that grant money to support this request and with our next year's budget deliberations, keep this situation in mind, so to be sure that our grant budget might accommodate the kind of suggestion that Councillor Wilson has suggested.
Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're gonna have any shortage of Ukrainian folks
No,
looking
no.
for some assistance. Counselor now,
Before we make a decision on it, I'd like to know, so this deposit for electricity, if it's refundable at the end of the contract term or whatever, then it's just a deposit for the electricity. Then I don't know why we would give them that money, because it's, in the end, we're gonna give them the money now, and then when they disconnect or whatever, we're gonna give it back to them. The deposit, the connection for the water I can see, but the 225, if it's just a deposit, then they're gonna get it back eventually.
We're just waiving the costs, whether it's a deposit or a fee, up to $350.
But they're gonna get that money back in the end, so therefore we're giving them the. They don't have to pay it now, and then in the end, we're gonna give it back to them.
so they're gonna end up with the money to pay. And
How about we try a motion there, or pardon me,
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor, go to it, go for it.
My simple workaround is that however administratively works out for the
Yes.
CEO, you figure out.
Mhm.
We should approve a waiver of these fees. If it's through a grant process, the CEO can figure out the dynamics of how that works out.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing is for clarity, like, if there is a refund, would you want it to go back to them or the town? The simplest thing to do is obviously just grant an amount of money and, you know, it's their money and they could use it for this or they could use it for something else. But if the town wants to have the money back, then we'll grant it to ourselves, and if
It could be some years.
deposit, we'll get it back.
they would leave, I think just a motion to do the grant would be,
And I'd like to move that. And the CEO will figure out how it works out.
okay, seconded by Councillor Feeney. You heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to the correspondence from Peter Redden, the Solar Garden Project location requests.
Your Worship, if I may, I'd like to make a motion that council direct staff to prepare a detailed response to Mr. Redden and Ms. Doig's letter regarding alternate sites and approaches for the solar garden project, including identified benefits and drawbacks of each, the timelines of any relevant decisions of council and references to any public documentation where available.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor now seconds. On the question.
Mayor, is there any chance that this report can be ready prior to the October 19th?
No, go ahead.
So yeah, I think we can have this report ready for the next meeting. It'll be tight, but that'll be the intention.
Next meeting is the 12th of October, 11th of October.
And just for the information of council, I've talked to Peter just casually about this, and he's quite happy with our approach, and would be also happy to have the response with his outline as a part of the display on the 19th.
Okay. On the motion,
So,
Deputy Mayor?
we'll go to that, just have a question around. So, comparing that correspondence with the Mossman's letter, and sort of wondering if rather than do individual responses, is combine all this into one response and make it a community response. I'm assuming it will lighten the load on the CEO, because I would say that we need to respond to that, although it's put here as a information item, it deserves a response to.
So you're suggesting that the report that's done in response to Mr. Redden's correspondence include and address the issues posed by Mr. Mossman's
Yeah.
letter?
And then make it a community response rather than an individual response to those two letters, so that,
Yeah, I'll get the same thing.
yeah, it just.
Okay.
They all get the same thing.
So-
And that is response to the questions that have been asked.
Okay. Mover, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, seconder? Okay, so you heard the motion? All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Next is correspondence information items. What is your wish, council?
I would like to comment on item 5.1, the petition from Bruce Barton.
Yes?
And I would like to move that council direct staff to make a response directly to Mr. Barton, thanking him for presenting the petition and acknowledging the sizable number of people who have signed the petition, and further pointing out that many of the questions that his signatories have asked will be addressed on October the 19th.
Okay,
That's a motion.
all right, that is a motion on 5.1. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney, on the motion, on the question? All in favor? The motion is carried. What about the rest of our information correspondence? Councillor Carver?
And I would move that items 5.2 to 5.8 under correspondence be received and filed.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson?
With the understanding that a letter will be going to the Mossmans,
Some of the previous.
similar to as we just discussed.
Yes. I think that was included in the motion that was made around the Peter Redden's letter. Okay, you've heard the motion,
Just for clarity, it's just one letter though, as I.
Yes.
understood it.
Yeah.
Okay.
but it will
A
encompass
copy of
the issues they raise as well as Mr. Redden's issues. Okay, on the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. It's the end of the month. This is the good staff report.
Plus, it's the first staff report that includes the new budget, so there's a lot of time spent updating all the budget initiatives in that tab. But that being said, even though they're all in there, most of them don't have accurate year-to-date totals. What I've tried to do this time around, because it was requested, is put in just when we know we've incurred some costs. So you'll
Mhm.
notice there's a little approximate there, because I don't want to go out on a limb, but that's my best understanding of costs incurred this time around, as opposed to just what's been billed, which is often very little at the time of the project. So I'm happy to take any questions. And you can also ask them later. if you want.
Councillor Carver.
I did send you an email, but I sent it since we've been sitting here, so
Oh,
that's not
have-
doing you a whole lot of
oh,
good.
okay. Were there any that didn't get addressed that might be useful for tonight?
I think I addressed them all, but you may wanna, you often like to come back to some of them.
Okay, sorry about this.
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I was really pleased to see the update in the finance manager's report about the rate study and the fact that that's, on the rails. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that late next month, but given everyone else's workload, I thought the fact that this is on the rails is really comforting.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
I'm trying to find it, but I can't fully find the number, but it has to do with the request by council to look into the old fire hall and its use.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to confirm that there is a report coming to the next council meeting. And the reason I'm asking that is because of the motion that will be before us later on in the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I I would not be prepared to support the motion without that report. And so for me, it would be best if we know for sure when that report is coming.
I don't think it'll be till the one after. I'm still waiting on the results. Just based on when the packages go then. So
So,
that's October 20.
yeah, late October?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Councillor Kerr?
So I do have a question, and I'm sorry, Mr. CAO, for coming at this one again. It's about the protocols needed to be developed for opening our lovely new fire hall as a comfort center, not an emergency center, but just a comfort center where people could come and get warm or charge their devices. And I'm asking specifically because other fire halls seem to be able to do that, and I don't understand why we can't, or why they're able to and we're not. Because residents have asked me this, because they see that the Lunenburg Fire Hall is open or another fire hall is open. And of course, Fiona triggered that worry about the next
The
hurricane.
rural ones in particular seem like to be.
Yeah, so I'm just worried, not very curious about why Lunenburg can do it and we're not doing it. What does it take to do what Lunenburg's doing?
I mean, the simple answer is just, we just built the facility, so we asked Brandon and Angela to develop protocols around opening. It's pretty simple, it's just, when do we open? So who's gonna make that judgment call? Is it after 8 hours without a power, with a power outage? Is it after an evacuation of buildings? How many buildings? How, you know? What about if it's in the outside areas? Is it gonna be exactly the same as if it's in Mahone Bay? How do we find out? Because we don't know if the power's off outside of town. We automatically know it, obviously here. So all those kind of triggers, so that in an emergency, we're not, you know, treating anyone unequitably. It's important to have that be approved by council. And then also in the actual operation of it, the fire department is not supposed to be impacted. So one of the key things in the way we designed the building was that the fire department could come in, do their whole response business, and there could still be public things going on within the building, but there have to actually be personnel supporting that. So if they're not the fire department personnel, who are they? Historically, we had a relationship with the Lions Club, but you know, the fact of the matter is, volunteers are hard to come by, and we need to have a protocol that will ensure somebody is there in the situation that triggers an opening. So that also has to be worked out. This storm did provide a bit of a little kick for Brendan, and also some good experience. He was talking to Richard and myself and Adam, and you know, trying to figure out what we would need to do and should we do it and what would. So it's kind of a good run through, but obviously would have been good to have last year. So you know, I kind of had to take an approach of get the building built, but you know, now that it's there, you're right. There's no reason other than answering these questions and answering them in a policy the council would have to approve that is preventing us from opening. And if we were in a situation where it was necessary to open, like just absolutely necessary, we can open. Like if the mayor's calling it an emergency, reaching out to me saying, can you do this? Or if I'm seeing from the fire department, they're coming in saying, all these people need somewhere to go. We can do it, and we have staff who can come in and work and be there, and possibly council members who volunteer. So it can be done. It's just that in this particular instance, none of the triggers really reached that point, and you know, absent any protocol, it didn't seem to be necessary.
When Brendan talked to me, he asked me about the Lions Club, man. I thought I made contact with them, and they just did not have the manpower. We did have a couple of members from the Lions Club who reached out to me personally and said they'd be willing to come in. And so when I called Brendan back, when he called me back, I told him, I said, if the cause is there, the need is there, open it up. We will see that there's somebody there. Because I knew some other individuals not associated with the fire department that would be willing to come in and lend that hand. So it only takes a couple of people with a comfort station, just to be sure there's somebody there to see that, you know, things go along well and maybe keep the coffee hot, you know. So it doesn't take very many for a conversation. Place where the overnight stays is an entirely different story.
Yes.
And that's not what I was asking.
No.
And I guess maybe part of it would be like, do we just bring the protocol for comfort center in sooner, you know, when that's available, because it is possibly going to be quicker than developing the protocol for emergency shelter. Although in a sense, emergency shelter is easier if you only open it when it is allowed to trigger Red Cross. The bigger issue would be if you wish to open it before Red Cross would be triggered,
Right.
then there's a lot more resources that would be needed.
Chances of us opening a shelter before Red Cross is involved is very slim.
Yeah, I can only really see
You know,
it
Red
as
Cross
like
usually always
immediate
installed with a
evacuation
shelter.
from town.
They're the ones that come in, set up the cuts, set everything up
You all- yeah.
for all that stuff. And they have trained people to come in to register everybody, get their contact information, their next of kin and all that stuff. So they have all that in place. So if it comes to being a shelter, then they are the first call as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, the only situation I'm imagining is like a fire evacuation of a large multi-unit building in town.
We would still contact. Red
But they
Cross.
may not be here before we
Yeah.
want people to be arriving. in
No,
the
no,
building.
you could do that,
Yeah,
but they would still come in with their stuff and.
but
do that
hopefully
all.
by the overnight component, they would.
Yeah,
they would do it.
Exactly.
Any thoughts on a timeline to have something that we can tell the citizens that is being worked on?
You're looking over there, but I guess this is really a question of when can the staff have this ready? I will speak with Brandon and see what
Okay.
his position
Alright.
is on that.
Now, in fairness, the power went out on Friday night at actually 1:30 Saturday morning. 8 o'clock, I had an email from a citizen saying, what time will the fire hall be open so I can charge my cell phone? So,
Yeah.
you know, it doesn't take them long. Okay. Anything else in the report to discuss?
I did have another question. Thank you very much, Mr. Hyde, for taking the time to answer those questions. So, but the one that I'm very curious about is the Plan Mahone Bay review and the draft documents. I've never understood why it's taken 14 months for those documents to come back to council, and do we know a reason? Do we have a reason? I mean, one of the things that's happened is I personally have totally lost the thread
Yeah.
now. So it's going to be hard to pick it up
Mhm.
again. So why 14 months?
In some ways, I would argue that maybe losing the thread will be a good reset for some of the people around the table, but yeah, I certainly wouldn't go out and blame Upland for that. It really what happened was a combination of other things that we were doing on our schedule and needing to have, and COVID, and needing to have an in-person session with all 16 members. And that just did not work out this spring, and when I thought it was going to, happened to be a time when I also became kind of unavailable, and it just, you know, we need to go from that into consultation, so having the steering team meetings at a time of year when we can go into consultation would make the most sense. And then when we did get to, you know, okay, the fall is gonna make sense, let's do it in the fall. Upland, of course, has other workload, they're not just sitting around, so when we were able to line up their resources, the committee's, you know, availability in a period of 3 months coming up where we could do consultation, it wasn't sooner. And even I take responsibility for that, because we should have been right on track in January, but meeting in person at that time
Right.
wasn't possible. So I did ask Upland, don't put this on your front burner, you know, because we're not going to be able to sit down and consider the results, and that put it off the rails. So I think we're back on the rails now.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll hold on to the idea that it's supposed to be coming at it with fresh eyes.
And in person, which,
And
like,
in
to
person,
be
yeah.
honest, I mean,
Yes.
we did have a good
Yeah.
series of discussions last fall, but being in person will probably be necessary to get over the hump, to get out the consultation.
Okay. Thank you, CAO. Any other questions? Hearing none. Entertain a motion to receive the report for information purposes. So moved, Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Now. On the question, all in favor, motion's carried. Okay, let's go to the staff report, fire station financing. Always a riveting topic.
But this is your second time having this report, so it should be pretty much old news. There was just a correction needed in the report with respect to what would be coming out of reserve. And at this point, the only thing coming out of reserve that we're recommending is a matching contribution to the fire department society's contribution on the hall component of the building, which was $250,000. So that is the only piece left to be action tonight. The other part of the recommendation on the original staff report was actioned at the last meeting. And actually, I can say happily, we just received the approved TBR. So we
Nice.
we
Thank
put,
God.
Ashley
That's
submitted the
Thank
debenture
you.
package today.
Thank you.
We're officially got confirmation that the debenture package has been received. So
Excellent.
so that part is done, but we do still need to take $250,000 from reserve to pay ourselves back for that contribution.
Mhm.
8x10 glossy of Deputy Mayor Peck in the package?
Yeah.
Or Deputy Minister Peck, Mark,
Oh, yeah.
our friend. Okay,
Should ask for more, Ellen, I guess, when we have a chance. Mayor, I'd move the council approve the transfer from the town's capital reserve in the amount of $250,000 for phase 2 of the fire station hall project.
seconded by Councillor Now. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Special election update.
All right, so this one is, I guess, the second in a series of updates from Maureen, having to do with the special election and all the many steps that go into that. So there's a series of recommendations that she has provided there, and they're pretty much all things that have to happen in order for the election to happen. So if anyone has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, the motions are in the report.
We have 4 motions in this. Councillor Carver,
I'll make the first motion, and we'll correct the Saturday to Tuesday, November 1st. So I move the council set Tuesday, November the 1st, 2022 as nomination day for the 2022 special election.
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney. On the question, all in favor? The motion's carried.
Mayor, I move that we appoint Leah Zink as the returning officer for 2022 town and of the home base special election.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the third part. Somebody wishes to make it. Councillor Wilson.
I move that council appoint Marie Hughes as the deputy returning officer of the 2022 town home based special election.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Carver. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. And the last one.
I'd like to move the council approve the use of the provincial list of electors for the 2022 town of Mahone Bay special elections.
Thank you. We have a seconder. Councillor Now. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. And there is a process by which people who may have moved into town can get themselves added to that list, I assume, Mr. Hyde?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
the usual, yeah, okay. All right. Let's go to the next item on our list, which is the municipal boundary review.
All right, so another one of these projects that Mo has already given you many reports about. This is the, I guess, erstwhile conclusion of that process. So it's got all the best information coming back through the session we had up at the fire station and subsequent surveys and everything. But at the end of the day, it is coming around the recommendations based on all of everything that we've read so far. The council would insert here as appropriate the choice of council based on the information that's been presented, which I think was broadly supportive of council's original indication of the status quo.
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I thought that was a good meeting. Not incredibly well attended, but the folks who were there debated vigorously. I think I'd move that council make an application to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board that the number of councillors for the Mahone Bay be 6. And that the count, do you want these in 3 motions, Mayor?
I think we could.
As well, Mayor, I'd move the council provide the reasons for the recommendations regarding the number of councillors being 6. And the council make application to the Utility Review Board and that Mahone Bay remain undivided by polling districts.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, on the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Richard, you almost could have been the counselor for Fairmont Street.
Upper Fairmont.
Mhm.
Fairmont.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to, I get my agenda back again. Request to use the old fire hall for the flu vaccination, their flu vaccine clinic.
So commonly, the pharmacy in the past has used the old fire hall when it was the current fire hall for the purpose of vaccine clinics. It was a little bit different because it would always be set up by the fire department with all their tables and everything, and then they'd come in and they'd kind of use that setup. So now the logistical challenges of, there are no tables in there and it's a big empty room are going to be the pharmacies to sort out if they are inclined to use the space and if we're inclined to accept it. But other than those challenges, staff would generally recommend that we do approve this because we're otherwise not using the space and it is good to leave it continuously occupied with the Scarecrow Organizing Committee moving out and pending council's decision around Public Works possibly using the space. This would come kind of nicely in between the two things. So take any questions if there are any.
The only question, Dylan, is why they wouldn't prefer to use the new hall with the new washrooms and the new accessibility and the new wide ramps and wide doors for wheelchairs and I'm not sure why we are going with the old building. We have a lot of brand new
To
building.
my knowledge, I haven't discussed that with them. I mean, obviously, the new hall doesn't have a protocol at this point about use. We're developing that to bring the council shortly.
Uh-huh.
There would be charges, typically for different types of things. The council would have to decide by policy whether there would be some kind of exception made for this, or whether this sort of requests would need to come to council in this event, or they would have to pay. So I think it's in the absence of those guidelines. They've always been allowed to use the old one, and so when we haven't charged them, so they're probably just asking because there is no clear guidance around the new one. But it is still council's prerogative outside of having a policy to approve a one-off. We will have a policy. We don't have one now. However, they have requested the use of the old space. So as far as I know, that's suitable. So maybe they like what they can set up and not have bingo going on the next day.
I'm prepared to make the motion that council accommodate the request of pharmacy to hold their annual flu clinic there this year.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Counselor Now. On the motion or on the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to the staff report on the business plan. Not something you're going to get rid of over breakfast.
Yeah.
So every year for the last 4 years, following the conclusion of council's review of the strategic plan and budget, we've been producing a business plan document. It is essentially the same document every year. It's not meant to be radically different every year. Obviously, we've had a lot of turnover in the past year, so we want to update our org charts and department structures, give everybody in the community a transparent view of what all the staff do and where they fit in. And then because council does have different objectives within the strategic plan over the course of your term, there's some updating as far as the objectives within the business plan. So that's been done now in terms of a draft, and we're recommending that council approve the draft. And as always, that document is primarily used as a public accountability piece, to help people learn about what the staff are working on.
Deputy Mayor?
There's a piece there for me that I think I might want us to discuss probably as a closed session item, because it might include conversations around staff and staffing. So I was wondering whether we can do that before approving.
So, yeah, well, you could defer this to later in the meeting if you want, and also when we go into closed session, if you know what like if it's personnel or just name that,
Yeah.
or whoever's making the motion can name that as part of the ground.
As part of the
Yeah.
going to, yep. Okay, so we'll defer that item till the closed session.
But if anybody has any open session questions,
No,
we're gonna be
well, it's
asked
time to
general
do it.
questions, and so if you do have any questions, you can ask them now still.
Little town, that org chart continues to.
I had,
I like it, a lot of, there's a lot going on, you can see with our partnerships.
I was curious about some of the things in the org chart, particularly around Riverport. Nancy is the manager of the Riverport Electric. And is she the manager of our electrical segment or section?
So it's, we obviously, this may be something that we should discuss in closed session. But, I guess I can say yes, for the last 2 years, Nancy has been on the org chart reflected this way. She was last year, she's again this year. And it does reflect a chain of command. So in terms of operational command, our PLT's team have Phil as their lead hand. And Phil goes to Nancy for direction, around contracting, coming in the standby and, all that kind of stuff. Because previously, Derek was responsible to act on behalf of both utilities in that role before Riverport hired a manager. And it was essentially deemed necessary, and I very much agree, to have a single person designated as the operational charge. So where it had been Derek, it could now be Nancy. There's no particular reason it has to be somebody with one or the other unit. It's just a question of who has the capacity to act. But Nancy is not an employee of the town of Mahone Bay, doesn't have spending authority, doesn't have that type of authorization with the town. And any other questions about that, we can talk about in closed session. But just for the public, like, it is important to clarify in open session that there is a direct chain of command within the electric utility, and Nancy is a part of that.
And your relationship with area CAO?
This was a question Councillor Carver raised by email. So areas intermunicipal agreement has a role for the CAOs. We form the expenditure authorization committee within area. So we actually have spending authority over that of the general manager. So when Aaron needs authorization, he has to go to myself and Jeff and Jen and Berwick for that approval. And so that's where I have a direct financial authority within area. So that's why that line is different from the, say, the RCD.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
Yes, please.
Call Councillor Carver.
Thank you. So that raised a question that's been floating around for the past month or so, is about the availability of the documents pertaining to area. So the reference to the area intermunicipal agreement. I don't recall ever having seen that, and I wonder if that's one of the documents that could be made available to us.
I had asked for documents from area, and Aaron had in his, Mr. Long in his response, noted the work that staff were involved in to prepare for the hearings at UARB around the rates, and that as soon as they could, they would send us the documents. So they're on the table. The request is out there for, there was a lot of information, especially the minutes of the meetings was I think one of the hard ones. I'd have to go back quite a ways to round them all off.
Well, it could be just ongoing from here to have minutes,
Well-
I suppose, unless other people would like to have the whole history. But yes, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you. Does Mr. Hyde have a copy of the intermunicipal agreement?
Well, I looked when David brought it up, and I can send it the one that I have. It just doesn't have signatures or anything. It, kind of when people ask for that, they usually want to see like the final version. So I have a version that was circulated indicating that it was the up-to-date version. It was circulated for a meeting of the board as part of a package. So it's just not the same version that what Aaron would probably say, here's your official document. But I assume that's why we're waiting on that one. I can send out the one I have if that's desired.
I'll talk to Aaron tomorrow and see if we can get a response. Unfortunately, there was going to be an area board meeting, but it got postponed yet again, so.
Mayor, just to be clear on the business plan, we're unable to get an approval to accept that now, but our plan is to have a few more questions asked in the in-camera session and then ratify it after that.
When we rise and report, we could ratify, it, or we could defer the ratification
So
to the next
meeting.
council meeting, so, as council wishes. Okay? Any other, no, there's no more. Okay. So much for that one. It's been deferred. Let's go to the transportation update. Fall 2022.
All right, so this is one that's I always enjoy having these conversations. We have an ongoing commitment from this council to transportation infrastructure improvements aimed at public safety and supporting active transportation. And over the last 4 years that I've been here, I know council's done quite a bit in that regard, pretty steady improvements. I think they've generally been well received in the community. And they're often motivated or perhaps like inspired by concerns the council is specifically hearing, such as those on Clearway and Kinburn Street, Claremont and Kinburn Street, apologies. So here are some more that have come to light. And so just it provides an update on everything council has done over the past year. It's quite a lot of progress. What are some of the new items that we're looking at, either because we previously provided staff with direction and now there is something coming back, like the 40-kilometer speed limit. And then also we've heard some resident concerns recently, so there's some discussion of that. Ultimately, it ends with a series of recommendations. Happy to answer any questions people may have.
Councillor Wilson.
The difference between a speed hump and a speed cushion is.
Speed humps and speed bumps and
unclear to
speed
me.
cushions.
And I'm wondering, I think I understand that there's a gap between them, but if it's a cushion, you can kind of sneak through on a bicycle or whatever.
It's a gap between the lanes, and so a bike could, but there's also room for bikes around the outside. The thought is that an emergency vehicle with a wide wheelbase could come up the middle, yeah.
And what are we proposing for Fulbrook Road?
Well, so we would have just said speed humps, but we had a consultation with the fire chief and he said, well, why don't we try cushions this time around? So I don't have a strong preference. I think they're both fine. I think it wouldn't be a bad opportunity to try out a different option. But at the same time, I'm sure there'll be some people who will say, council can't even make up their mind about what kind of speed humps to put on it. So, you know, it's your preference.
Dylan, I'm really thrilled with this, actually. I know just having a definitive answer from the province, what regardless, just a definitive answer is just a breath of fresh air.
Supportive
So,
answer.
I mean, I'm a bit disappointed that the 30, that the 50 is 50. But I mean, I think there is a logical rationale there that I can live with. And now we can obviously appoint everybody to the MLA to further the conversation with that level of government. Now, but 40 sounds good to me as a good placeholder. I mean, I would have been okay with 35 as well, but I'll take what we can get. And the fact that that we have this small win now is great news. So I think we should proceed.
Councillor Carter.
I agree. I'm so happy about the 40 limit. But I really am puzzled about the limitation on Main Street and Edgewater and the rationale of it, because it's whatever it is. That it
Part of
has
the
to
provincial
retain
highway
the
system.
50 kilometer speed limit. I don't understand that when it goes through a teeny tiny town and you're maintaining the same speed as outside of. I don't understand the rationale.
Yeah, all I can say on that is that I was told that the province has received a large volume of requests from towns about reductions in speed limits. And as a result, they've decided to allow for reductions in speed limits other than on arterial and collector roads. And these are arterial and collector roads. What that definition, why it goes through town, so it's obviously not going to be more than 50. How is it a highway if you're traveling at less than 50? But that is their definition. So that's the line they've drawn in terms of approving for reductions at this time.
Are we permitted to use other methods of traffic calming on Main Street and Edgewater to discourage speed?
Well, that's basically, what we have done is
Right,
just
okay.
try to get traffic slowed and
Yeah.
by, having stops and having crossings. So yeah, any of that is allowed. I mean, if we put in speed humps, I don't know if the province would decide to say anything about it. It's not strictly prohibited, but at the same time, if they got some complaints from truckers or anything, they might come back to us and talk about it. Usually they're used on local roads. So.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the 40 kilometer an hour. I'm just not sure how much it's gonna do for slowing down the speed in town without proper enforcement.
Enforcement, yeah.
Because they're not obeying the 50, they're not gonna obey the 40. That's my feeling on it. I would certainly support it, but I don't think, no, that's gonna do a whole lot of good. As far as the speed humps, speed bumps go, I'm not really in favor of that, seeing what we've had on Claremont and Kinburn Streets. The cushioning might make a difference, I'm not sure it will. Pleasant and Bobo are commonly used for the ambulances and other emergency response vehicles. We're going to Lunenburg, I think that's the way we travel. So I just think it's, you know, I can see those ambulances with patiently going over those speed humps. And, you know, I just don't agree that with them being used.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, so, not that I disagree with you, just another point of view is that I think there's a lot of reluctance to use speed humps in North America that I haven't seen anywhere else, which is very, very interesting. And I think in terms of emergencies, if I think of, there's some very large cities that still have speed bumps and you still have emergency vehicles go through. It just means that there will be a slowdown at particular sections, which is what you want anyways, for speed to be reduced. Now, I think I'm with Councillor Wilson around. I don't know whether there's a significant difference with the cushions and humps, and I wonder just what it portrays in terms of decision making if we are testing these things out in that manner. So my preference would be just if you're doing speed humps, just do them speed humps all over, test that. And then if there's any repairs that are required, which will be required after a while, and speed humps are proven to be damaging to emergency vehicles, then we revisit that rather than have, I guess, a mixture of the two.
I know the fire department curses those every time we respond to a call, 'cause we had to slow down to a big crawl. We barely crawl across them, so it's really slowing our response by a minute or two, and that means a lot. We got a major part.
All of your
Emergency.
vehicles are in the same situation, or is it
All our
the
response vehicles.
big
are.
water tanker that has the
They're all-
biggest
yeah.
problem, or
Well, they all have the same.
really?
So I guess just since-
Come up to it, you're hitting the brakes to slow down, and then you're.
Since we're speaking to the public, I guess I'll reiterate because the report points out, but we did consult with the fire department before
Yes.
putting them in.
Mhm.
Most recently, when I talked to the current chief, he did say it was about a 30-second delay on calls, whether they were going in one direction or the other. I think we can probably agree that we gained more than 30 seconds with the new fire station. Doesn't mean we should give it up on the streets, but at the end of the day, you know, a lot of factors contribute to response time, not just how quickly you drive through town. And generally, emergency vehicles are not intended to exceed the speed limit,
Yeah.
which will be
Yeah,
40 soon. That's
And
based on the
perhaps the
discussion.
cushion, the speed cushions will make enough of a difference to alleviate that concern.
I'd like to see that put to the use to see how they do work.
And good feedback from Quebec. That's the jurisdiction that's made the most use of them. They're quite, like in Quebec, you'll see them much more commonly than you'll see speed hump with the
Yeah.
contiguous design.
Oh, has EHS had a problem with them, similar to the fire?
I've not heard
vehicles?
anything from them,
Mhm.
but it doesn't mean,
No.
silence doesn't necessarily mean that they're happy with them. Yeah, but they would encounter them all over the province because it's a province-wide organization. And, you know, if you drive off the main streets in Halifax at this point, you're pretty much going to encounter speed humps. They're all over the residential areas there.
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, a couple of the other items in the memo. The signage around the parking lot at the tennis courts. So that parking lot, I can't recall, we were going to pave that parking lot, were we? And then we ended up just putting another level of crushed gravel on that to get through the year. That was sort of in our long-term plan to pave that at some point, to be, you know, whether it's next year or the year after that. It's on the It's on a
Yeah,
long-term
we
plan.
council's discussed it. We did have the opportunity,
Right.
we got a quote on it as at the time of the project and we decided not to, but it doesn't mean it's not possibly in the cards. in the
So-
future.
When in the memo, it sort of describes that as the public parking lot really being used by people parking their cars there and then getting on their bikes and using the trail. Fantastic. It's just, is that parking lot large enough to accommodate both that function and the tennis court if it becomes more heavily in use with signage? I noticed that up by Long Hill Road now, like last night when I drove by, there were like 9 cars in the parking lot, which is fine too. Just like you can tell the rail activity is way up. I'm just wondering if we put the sign there, does that mean we're essentially going to have a much more louder, are we gonna have a bigger volume of cars parking there?
Mm.
And is that what we expected? That's on Hawthorne Hill, right? Is that right?
Yeah, so I mean, I can kind of speak to that. Like, obviously, you're right. There's more and more use of the various trailhead parking in town. It's quite common to see Long Hill totally occupied, more people up at the top of Welcome and Y Street, which isn't an advertised connection. And then the parking over at Clearland Road, there's always 1 or 2 cars on Faubourg, you know, but none of these places offer nearly as much space as what the one behind the tennis court does. So you're right to think that as, you know, an additional area is appealing to people because it is a large parking lot with easy trail access. Short of big events at the tennis club, I would say there's ample parking to accommodate both uses. Every now and then the tennis club has an event. At the end of the day, there is also a very large public parking area on the other side of the tennis club. So in those rare occasions when perhaps there is some overflow, there's nothing to prevent the public from parking in the parking for the fire station. You know, it is a public parking lot and walking around. So I would say there's really no risk in terms of the, you know, tennis court being squeezed out. But we could always reserve a number of spots in that parking lot for the tennis club. I would say I'd probably wait until if it's gonna be paved, but if we were going to pave it, we could designate the spots along the fence. Or even just put up a sign, I guess we could now, we could just put up a sign along the
This
fence.
this may not be an issue. Just, I was surprised by the volume of cars that are now parking up on Long Hill Road, which is good news. I mean, it's good that the trails are being used. It's just.
And maybe they're parking there for Betty's.
Yeah, I know, fair enough. I
Yeah.
mean, fair enough.
That's right, parked the Betty's and last
Yeah.
time I was
I
there.
parked on Kinburn last time.
Did you?
So that is the new trailhead signage is going to be installed by the local trail association up on Hawthorne at that.
Yeah,
intersection.
so basically, like if
Mhm.
picture the kiosk and stuff at Long Hill and similarly at the Clearline Road one.
Mhm.
That's what they want to put a little sign, and the kiosk, I think, is kind of what they're looking for.
Mhm.
Why don't we start there, Mayor, and I'd move that council convey approval for the installation of the new trailhead signage by the local trails association. I guess it's in that location. It's implied it's in that location by the memo.
Yeah. Okay, you have a seconder? Counselor Wilson, on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the motion on the speed limit setting. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I'd like to move that council hereby sets speed limit within the boundaries of the town of Mahone Bay at 40 kilometers per hour, with the exception of Main Street and Elgura Street, which are considered arterial collector roads by the province and therefore have a speed limit of 50 kilometers per hour. And establish school zones where the speed limit drops to 25 kilometers per hour when children are present.
Thank you.
Not 30 kilometers an hour speed limit.
Oh, sorry.
It does.
Well, all right, well, put that in the motion, the report.
The motion's amended to from 25 to 30.
Are we allowed to drop it to 25?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it wasn't, so that's on me.
It's usually 30.
It's 30.
Counselor Carly, you seconded?
Yes.
Okay. On the question, will there be a suitable period of education for motorists to advise them that the sign change is coming?
Yeah.
And then when it's installed, before we start to enforce?
I think what we'll do is we'll probably get it in the newsletter before the signs go up and the social media. And then between that getting out there and the signs coming up, we'll just tell the police to initially advise people that if they didn't know now they've been pulled
Okay.
over, that should be their warning, you know? So the police don't have to give a ticket for things. Now, if you're exceeding a certain amount over the posted speed limit, then they're probably not gonna let you off, but you would have been speeding whether it was 50 or 40 at that point. So
Mhm.
if you're going 50 in what just became a 40 zone, I think they'll probably be inclined to just
A
give
bit
people a
of-
warning
yeah.
initially, yeah.
Okay, we have a motion moved and seconded on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Second motion, please, or the second one on the sheet. On speed humps.
I move the council approve the installation of speed cushions on Pleasant Street from Fairmont to Faubourg Road, as well as on Faubourg Road, with a letter to be distributed to residents of Pleasant and Faubourg, informing them of the town's intention in this regard and providing contact information for the town's CAO/traffic authority.
Okay, seconded?
Yeah.
Okay, and a question.
So in the map, it sort of indicates on Pleasant Street, there will only be two speed cushions. And I was sort of wondering why not all the way down?
Well, I think, you know, this was approximate, but it was basically based on the minimum or maximum distance between them that we applied on the other location where we put them in. So then they can, I did check, I think they can be up to 200 feet apart maximum. There's a limit at which they could be apart where you have to do new ahead signage. You're like speed hump ahead, so, you know. So if you put them all in one contiguous section, you do one ahead and then each one has its own sign. So I think that's 200 feet. But you can put them closer together. There's nothing saying you can't put more. So that would just be something for discussion.
So what I
So
saw.
we'd have to put a minimum of 2 on Pleasant Street based on that configuration.
Hmm,
The way you've indicated them,
Oh,
they
what
all
is that?
come up on the, I guess, the upper part of the street, you know, so I'm wondering.
Well, the
lower
motion
part,
actually is only from, at least the motion as it was read, is only from Fairmont up. And the reason for that was that we've tracked speed on both sides, so there's a 5 to 10 kilometer an hour distinction in terms of how fast people are driving on that side versus on.
Oh, yeah.
hmm.
Yeah, so it's accelerating from the four-way stop up to Faubourg or coming off Faubourg and not slowing down until they reach the four-way stop, and then people just don't get up to the same speed in the lower section. That's what we found with the tracking.
Counselor Kerr.
Well, I think partly on the lower section, because there's often so many cars parked along the side that cars have to slow down and let the opposing
Traffic
traffic
calming,
come
so
through.
that's.
That's traffic calming,
Yeah.
exactly, it is. I must say, I'm not a fan of the speed bumps and the distance between Fairmont and Faubourg is a very small distance. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced, so I probably won't support this vote. But how many people do we have around the table? I don't want to defeat it, but I probably won't support it.
Well, if you
And
don't-
where would on Faubourg, they're going to go? Starting at the trail.
Above Pine Grove, up by the trail.
So that one showing on the map here, showing right at the trail, I'm assuming it's not gonna be right where the trail goes across, they have to go across that to go across over. It'll be on either side of the trail.
Yeah, I think,
crossing.
if possible, we're gonna look at like the approach and how far ahead you can see the speed hump, but it would be, I think, desirable to slow down traffic before the crossing. We'll have to look at the actual, I drove down it and was kind of looking at that from that perspective, and to me, I believe there's plenty of visibility to have one before the crossing, but obviously a lot of people are coming around that corner down the hill pretty quick. So,
Yeah.
you know, initially we'll need a lot of new signage for that.
It's not-
There'll be an ahead sign around the corner, and then, you know, when you get to it, there'll be additional signage, but.
I think this is gonna make a huge difference on Pleasant. I think it will work, actually.
Worth a try. And anything that interferes with the Bay trails, I mean, I have trouble staying on my bike as it is, putting speed humps in the way. Okay, anything else on the question? You heard the motion? All in favor? Motion's carried.
Oh, you didn't ask for opposed.
Well, you're the only hand that didn't go up. I just assumed you were opposed. Are you opposed?
It's sort of courteous.
Are you opposed, Counselor Faber? Okay. We normally don't even show that in our records. It's just the motion was carried unless we ask for a
Recorded.
recorded vote.
No, but we will still do both.
We can talk about it when we go back to our council policy.
Wait, Mayor, one question before the final motion about the western end of the public parking lot on Claremont Street. So this is the western end close to the Kimburn Pharmacy?
No, it's the other end.
By the
The
boathouse.
other end.
By the boathouse. Ah, fair enough. So a bike rack at the far end. Gotcha.
Yeah, it could be just positioned
By
adjacent to
the-
the
by the
aquatic
bridge.
gardens entrance, like we
Yeah.
could just put it there. The thought was basically, and this was back to the Blue Root Community Hubs, is that we've now got
Yeah.
a sort of a series of low volume, slow streets,
Mm-hmm.
and presuming that Pleasanton and Bober joins that list, that comes off the trail in one place, through town, connects residential areas to the school, to shopping, et cetera. But what it doesn't include anywhere in town is Main Street. It's always skirting Main Street.
Mhm.
So it's to say that like if you come off the trail or come from this side of town, outside town, and you get down as close as you can to Main Street, but you're not gonna bike on Main Street, and that could be for a variety of reasons, but you know, people's different ability levels, different ages, you want a place to put your bike. So this would kind of be like,
Mhm.
this is the closest you're gonna get to Main Street, put your bike here, do your shopping type of thing.
Mhm.
Because we don't have any bike racks in that area,
Council Perry.
and we have a grant for it, which is part of why. it's so good to do.
So I just suddenly had an image of that the bike rack might take up a parking space, and not that I really want to defend parking cars, but they're so much used, those parking spaces. Because will it avoid the parking spaces?
We'll have to look at where the pavement ends versus the end of the property, whether we paved it right to the property line at the western end. Or if we go for putting it adjacent to the bridge, can it fit off of the existing pavement? I would have thought probably we'd lose the space, and I would generally recommend council being willing. I mean, it's actually in most of the land use bylaws now to trade for bicycle parking spaces for one car parking space. So with that kind of a trade, I think it probably is worthwhile to give up a parking space, but.
Mhm.
And it does send a message. It does send a message in terms of what you're prioritizing.
Mhm.
For the
I'm just thinking
bike
that-
riders in particular?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like if we're going to do that, like why wouldn't we really do it? And take a real parking spot? Like if you're going to do,
Hmm.
otherwise, like you might as well just use the Jubilee Park space across from the Legion with this lot, which is only, 30 yards away.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, anyway, I think we should approve the motion and maybe, but I think we should evaluate the optimum location. And maybe it's there, maybe it is in that particular location, but maybe it should be, that's still a long way from. You're still getting off your bike and still walking to the pharmacy and.
Like the motion could just say in the parking lot, like we could just identify it instead of saying at the western end, we
I
could
guess it
just
has to
say
be town
at
property,
the
right?
parking lot on Claremont, and then
Mhm.
you could come back with a, here is where within the parking lot, little schematic, because I didn't have
Mhm.
that done for this meeting.
So we have a bike rack at the bandstand, right? I think we do.
Yeah, there's bike racks
There's
there
one
and
here.
on Edgewater, and yeah.
Okay,
Excuse me.
we still have to vote on the motion.
Well, nobody's made it yet.
Nobody paid yet.
If somebody was.
Sure.
And just to stress that, like, it kind of is a compliment to all the argument that the speed humps are part of a project intended to improve conditions for active transportation, which is the funding source that we're tapping into. So it's good to also include some things like this.
Okay, so can we get a motion on the installation of the kiosk?
Right, Mayor, the council approved the installation of the wayfinding kiosk and bike racks at the western end of the public parking lot on Claremont Street, supported by confirmed funding from the Connect 2 program.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor seconds. Question? All in favor? Motion's carried.
May I have a question before we leave the topic of transportation?
Mhm.
Which is, are the speed humps, cushions on Fobo and Pleasant intended to be permanent or temporary?
They are intended to be permanent. I mean, they'll have to be
So
reinstated.
this isn't a
over time.
trial. basis?
I mean, we don't have articulated any time frame for a trial. Obviously, council could, after a few years, decide, you know, to do different. But there's no like, we will revisit motion or anything on the table.
Thank you.
Okay,
That's good.
let's, appointments to the, we go on to, council items, 7.1.
Mayor, with regard to 7.1, without a full contingent of council members and as well, I'd say a lukewarm response to our inquiries for committee members from the community. I think we had 3 terrific candidates put their name forward who will make terrific contributions to the project. But of course, our objective was to try to find many as 7. So I think we're just a little bit off on timing, and I guess I'd recommend to council that we defer the item until later on in the year when we have a full contingent of council members there to populate the committee, and as well give staff enough time to maybe go out with a second canvas for community members.
Okay,
Yeah, and
Deputy Mayor?
I guess for me, just appealing to whoever is in the community and they're listening to council discussing this. We got requests from the community to revisit the logo conversation. We have revisited it. We've allocated sort of a budget to it. We're asking the community to come on board with council to come up with a new community logo. I, as a person, I'm disappointed in the amount of response that we received. The 3 candidates we got are fantastic and great, but we're asking for more participation. And so whoever's out there in the community that is interested in a community logo, this is the opportunity to participate. Kindly show up. Otherwise, we will struggle being stretched as council to do this by ourselves. So,
We are looking for 2 members of council to participate as well.
and so meet us halfway. That's what we're asking for.
Okay,
So Mary, there, hearing that, I defer the item until the first council meeting in January.
okay. And staff can send out another call for,
So just to, are we, is this done? I don't know if there's a motion. Can I?
No, you-
Sure.
I just want, so is it until January or is it in the first of whichever comes sooner, we get enough names or the first of
Yeah,
January?
I guess just back on the council agenda.
I just mean if,
Or-
if after this meeting airs,
we get 4 new
We get-
names.
then would we go ahead and consider them or?
Sure.
Okay,
Sure,
and if that would be your motion, if we're, your motion.
that's fine, Mayor.
Councillor Carver.
One of the factors that I have in my mind is the fact that at the end of this calendar year, council appointments will be redesignated or reallocated. And so it made sense to me to think about doing this after that process takes place, so that January made sense to me.
But I guess as a kind of a counterpoint, this is an ad hoc, like, special purpose committee, and if it's going to be able to engage in engagement activities over the winter or like do anything, it probably would be better to get the members appointed sooner. Like, because if they only get appointed in January, we could be in the
Sure.
summer before they're prepared to engage with the community about a logo.
I hope we're overwhelmed with
Yeah,
candidates.
and if we're not, then January. So do you want to restate as a motion? that
So
you're-
we're-
Yes. So I guess upon the full contingent of members on the community, from the community and from council. And if not, we'll revisit it and make a decision to move forward one way or the other with the folks who signed up in January.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah.
On the question.
So will we notify the ones that have already
Yeah.
applied? That this process is being ongoing, but we haven't made that, I think we should definitely put those ones on the committee because they applied by the
They did what
deadline.
they were supposed to do and did it
Right.
in
So I
the
think we
right
should
timeline.
I think we should notify them
I
of that
agree.
and then proceed from there.
So the 3 names we've got are in. We're looking for 4 more.
Should that be part of the motion to accept the 3 applications that have been?
If they're in as in they're appointed, then it should be. If they're in as in they're at the top of the list for appointment, then that's up to you. I don't know what was intended as far as that goes. Also, we're still in discussion on the motion because we never even got a second.
Oh, right, right.
I don't know where, I'm writing, but.
But I'll say.
Yeah, he said,
Yeah, he
yeah,
said-
Deputy
oh,
Mayor
okay.
seconded, and then he had a question.
Sorry.
Yeah,
So then
So
we
my
need them
motion,
to. make a
so
change.
my motion did not include the appointment
of the
of
three.
of the three.
So we can
But-
still
but
let them
obviously-
know that they're on the
Yeah.
list, but if we need another motion or amendment to this one to actually appoint.
All right. Okay, you've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? It's deferred. Thank you.
So I'll move the second motion,
For the three,
yeah, to inform them that they will be on the list for
Mhm.
nomination.
I would second that motion.
okay? On the question,
On favor?
all in favor? Thank you. Okay, so we'll let them know that they're that close. 7.2, Public Works use of the old fire hall.
Yeah, back in the last meeting, we were discussing the use of the fire hall. And I was looking at the condition of our current public works building and how, as far as I'm concerned, unsafe it is. And I said that I would make this motion, so now I'm making the motion. The council approve the Public Works Department move to the old fire hall at 184 Kenmore Street, at least until April 2023, to assess the feasibility of a permanent move to that location.
Okay. Do we have a seconder?
You have a seconder.
You?
Uh,
Okay,
and I have a
on the question.
I have a question, which is, are we talking about putting public works into the whole building or into the garage portion of the building?
At least the garage part, if they need the whole part,
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you all, work always expands to fulfill the.
just to fill the space, exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. I think, it'd be nice if they were in the whole thing. If for this trial period that they only move I think they should at least move the trucks in there for the winter. Because right now it's not safe for them out, they're delayed on snow clearing because they have to clear their vehicles and equipment before they can go do any snow clearing,
Hmm.
so.
Where's Jonathan's office, CAO?
Where is it now?
Yeah,
It's in the
in the back.
office at back. So
Okay.
there is some office spaces
There's office space,
attached to the base.
That's
But
moving.
I do have a comment or question.
Okay,
So just to clarify, as I understand this motion, if it were to pass, we would not be making modification to the building, like we don't have a budget for that or anything, so in terms of use of the other space, it's not like, we're not gonna use it in any kind of transformative way, there might be a little bit of stuff stored there, the washrooms obviously across the technical dividing line, as you know, Richard, but Jonathan's long-term desire would be to add an additional service bay and a delivery door to where the
Mhm.
current front of the hall were located. We wouldn't be doing anything like that on the basis of this motion.
No, I didn't
Yeah.
need for to make any
Exactly, yeah, so
alterations
that's
to the building, but
just the.
just here will give us an idea of how feasible it is to, okay, here you go, Public Works, the whole building is yours.
Council Perva.
I'm a little bit leery of the motion, the way it's phrased. I would be happier if it included the word temporarily, move temporarily to the old fire hall or fire station at Kinburn Street, at least until April 2023, and I would delete the last clause. Because for me, in my mind, it gets confused with the issues that we've already talked about, which is asking to have a report on the evaluation of the property and assessment of possible uses. I get my anxiety or my concern is that this sort of has the Public Works Department preempting the space. So I wonder if the mover and seconder would consider adding the word temporarily, move temporarily, and to delete the final clause.
I would go along with the temporary part of it. I'm not sure I want to delete that final clause, because besides having the assessment of the building that we're looking to get within the next little while, this way here, we know roughly what it's taking for us being in that building. So I think we can assess what it's gonna cost us for having them in there, comparing it to whatever we might get for the assessment of the building.
Okay, Deputy Mayor,
So
then,
I do, I think I've expressed this before, I think Public Works needs a better working space. I do support the idea to give them a better working space, but I think we had a robust conversation about the use of that old fire hall and what would help us make this decision and make it for good without having this back and forth. And so we've been promised there's a report coming next month at the end of the month. I just wait for that report rather than make this decision. That's just what I'm urged to do. We will come to a decision to be made like this at some point, but I don't feel the emergency to make it today. We can wait 2 more meetings and make the decision. That's just where I'm at right now. And I wouldn't want to defeat this motion for the sake of doing that. I would want us to have that in the so we can have a good, robust conversation that moves us forward.
Just
Councilor,
in regard to that, Deputy Mayor, we get that report next month. Are we gonna be ready to act on that before April? Anyway, so that this wouldn't really,
I thought that was a sentiment that was expressed at the last meeting. That certainly wouldn't be anything that would happen until spring, till April, May, so that the public works can get out of that building at least for this winter. And then we'll see where it goes.
So just on those timelines, that obviously we're not gonna be constructing a new building for Public Works before this winter. So on that front, council will not have the opportunity to make and implement a decision. But the possible divestiture of the existing old fire hall building could begin sooner than April. However, if Public Works were in there, it could also just be timed so that the closing of any sale was in April. And, that's council's decision to make. So, it's not gonna interfere with that timeline to go ahead and have Public Works in there over the winter, unless the timeline were to have the closing of the sale of the building before April. That would be the only interference. And then certainly if the council decides to build a new Public Works building, they won't be moving into it until at the soonest next fall. That would best case scenario.
exactly, so it's like I say, this will give them a safe spot to work this winter. Rather than going through what they're going through back there. When they put a garage door up, they gotta quickly get a piece of wood under it, so it doesn't come down on their heads, then that's not safe.
I'd say, that's right. Councilor Feeney,
So, like, as you know, Mayor, as I said before, like, I'm really in favor of divestiture of the building. I don't want to put any more cash into a 75-year-old building. Especially when I have to borrow to make the renovation. If I'm gonna borrow at 6.5%, 7% interest, which is where I think the municipal finance corp debentures coming in at.
yeah.
I want the asset to last a long time. And so I don't know. I just think that we incrementally are making incremental decisions to move into that building. I think it'll be harder to market when we have it as a garage for Public Works. It'll be harder to market when we have, Public Works equipment scattered. It'll be easier to market if it was empty. And it'll be easier to evaluate if it's empty. So I would, in a perfect world, we would have had the report already, but I can personally wait very patiently another 2 months to the deputy mayor's point, and we can revisit this in late October, early November. If the other building is so safe that it is really a safety hazard, well, then that should be addressed anyway.
Councilor Carver.
Thank you. My question is along the lines of Councillor Feeney's last comments about safety. And what other I mean, well, I think we all recognize the need for more safety measures and better working conditions for public works. But what other avenues could provide some better elements of safety and work environment short of moving into the old fire hall?
CAO?
We have a good understanding of the deficiencies with that building. It's just that to Councillor Feeney's point, we'd be putting money into that building. And staff's recommendation is that we tear that building down.
Right.
So I guess that would be the alternative, is we do invest in that. But I have given Jonathan the go ahead. If there's anything that he deems, to Richard's point earlier, to be an immediate safety hazard, they have to use the building for now, so they have to put money into it as needed. But he's hesitant, of course, to draw that line anywhere beyond the cheapest possible solution at the moment for the sake of investing in a, you know, that building is certainly not worth rehabilitating.
Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Wilson.
So I know I'm new to Nova Scotia, but winter is not starting tomorrow or next month,
Yeah,
right?
hard to say. We're going on.
Not bad on that.
So what I'm just urging us is that let's make decisions with the full array of information we've requested, because I think we've requested that information with a purpose in mind of to accommodate all those variables that we've talked about and all those perspectives. And what I'm urging is just let's delay this decision making until the CEO has promised last meeting of October, right? That report will come, this conversation will come to the table.
Before remembrance.
Yeah. And then we can have that conversation and talk about whether this makes sense based on a decision we've made on what we're doing going forward with the building. Because if we're saying going forward with the building is to do a divestiture, then maybe this might not be the best thing for us to do. If a decision is to maybe wait until next year, then maybe this becomes a feasible solution. So I'm just urging that we don't have to make that decision today. Let's just wait.
There's going to be nothing in that report at the end of October that will change the situation we have. Because nothing is going to be done until spring at the very earliest. And we know we need to move public works somewhere. And we only have one somewhere. So there are two things I want to say. One is that I happily support this motion as long as we have an ironclad guarantee that they only go into the garage portion for two reasons. One is because if they creep into the other section, it's game over. And secondly, the 2,500 square feet of that garage portion is probably is 10 times as much as they've got now. And should, with any reasonable assumption, be adequate. And that would be a good opportunity to find out if it is adequate. So with that in mind, I would like to move that we table this motion until the last meeting in October.
So that motion
You
can be made, is in order.
to defer it?
Yeah, like on the discussion on a motion could be made.
Okay,
We need to a seconder and then separately resolve that motion.
okay. You,
I'll second Councillor Wilson's
motion to defer
motion to defer and a question. May I?
on the question.
Ah.
Go ahead.
If we do defer this, the motion, do we have to then come back to the exact same motion that has been proposed today?
This was a motion to table, so yes, if we weren't getting discussion on a motion, you'd be doing a deferral of the item. But this is a motion to table a motion that's on the floor. And it's deemed as hostile, so it has to be the exact same motion that was originally made.
Right, and I've seconded the motion to defer. Now I'm gonna have to vote against it.
Okay, we have a motion to defer, moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion's carried, so it's deferred. One naysayer.
And when was it tabled until according to your motion?
Last meeting in October.
In October.
Last regular. meeting.
Yeah.
And the reason
one
I,
month.
well,
No,
I should have said this during the discussion, I'm sorry. The reason I do not support that deferral motion is because I'm a little concerned that if the exact same motion comes back to the table, it will be defeated. And then where will we be?
Well, we'll be in discussion on that same motion, and at that
Yeah,
time,
that-
it could be either amended or withdrawn by the mover and
the
seconder. That's up to
information
them.
presented around it may cause it to
Thank you,
Up
that
to
helps.
Richard and,
could be defeated.
Just to say, so Jonathan doesn't feel that I'm not supporting. I would love for public health to be supported in this way, but we need to make a decision,
Yeah,
taking into account everything that we pass.
okay,
I think if they get approval, they can move pretty fast from one.
Yeah, and it's also gonna help the election department, because right now. The,
Well, that's where the concerns
Either
here,
or.
how adequate the space in the bay is, because they're gonna move at least one truck in, and anyway, we'll see what
Well, it'll hold
happens.
one, it'll hold one.
I mean, there's-
But
okay.
Anyway,
The last item on our regular agenda is the minutes of the Asset Management Committee meeting of September 22nd. The questions on the minutes, and there is one motion.
And normally it's the chair who makes it, but the chair is the chair of this meeting, so does anybody want to make a motion?
I would.
Counselor Feeney,
Mayor, move that the committee recommend. I move the council direct staff to send a letter to Patty Sharp expressing our appreciation for her service on the Asset Management Committee.
thank you. Seconded by Counselor Now. On the question, I just, one observation, this is probably the 8th or 9th time that council has gotten a motion to send a letter to someone to thank them for. Could we not make that part of our
It should
normal
be a normal.
committee policy, that when a member of a committee leaves, that council issue an expression of thanks for their contribution and support? And we wouldn't have to go through this every time.
I guess 2 points, yes, absolutely, and the committee's policy is coming up in policy and strategy
Yes.
soon. But also, going through the motion is also a way to show respect to the person, right? Like the committee recommended it, and but yeah, you can certainly, when we get to committee's policy.
And it's the same as thanking somebody for writing to council. Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about it being a formal expression of it at council. But my main question is about why are there so many vacancies on this committee? There seem to have been several people stepping down from the asset management committee. And is there?
I
something-
wouldn't say there's, Patty moved out of town, so that's why
okay.
she's,
Oh,
and she expressed that she would have loved to continue, so I don't think there was any concern there.
that's helpful, but it seems to me over the past few years, there,
We've
Yeah,
never had a
people
full
step in.
slate, I don't think, on that.
I think we reached the full slate this spring when Tim was on it, and then
For one
when Tim only made it to one meeting, and then he felt, I think it was too much to be committed to that, so. With Tim coming off, the committee discussed, do we go out and try to replace this one member now? Knowing there's a general call for turnover of committees coming up later in the year. And it was the committee that felt it wasn't really necessary to do anything to push that one vacancy. Now there's 2 vacancies, so it's a little bit more necessary, but we still have 3 public members on the committee who have been very, very regular in their attendance, I would say.
Yep,
really
they
on
have
this
been.
meeting.
good, thank you. That's good to know.
Okay,
Does anybody want to move acceptance of the, could we do that with these, right? I don't know.
Move to accept the minutes of
We'll take the
the
minutes.
Asset Management Committee, September
Okay.
22nd.
seconded, deputy mayor, all in favor, motion's carried.
It's gonna be a
Okay, so that concludes our agenda. We do have 4 in-camera items for the closed session. Under the NGA 22(2)F for litigation or potential litigation. The MGA 22(2)A acquisition, sale, lease, and security of municipal property. MGA 22(2)E contract negotiations, and the fourth one was personnel, I think, wasn't it?
Yes,
Yeah, okay. Before we go to that,
thank you.
Thank you.
Do we know if anybody's watching from home? Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks.
So why don't you just, I think there were 3 or 4 viewers, do the reminder to people at home and then ask people in the room, and that'll give people on YouTube a moment to type their comment.
Okay.
You wanna do your usual.
If you, for the folks at home, if you have a question or a comment you'd like to make on anything that we discussed tonight, if you will send that in to us. It does take a minute or so for that to happen, and we will address it and sign off. Did you have anything you wish to say?
I do. My name is Mark Kennedy.
Okay, Mark Canterbury.
Of course, know who I am. I live down on Main Street, 782 Main. And I'm of course opposed to the solar power line and roadway going across my property. I'm very disappointed tonight that I thought I was going to hear something. I drove a few hundred kilometers from a job site to be here tonight to listen to anticipating that there was going to be some discussion about this, and to find out that it's just moved to the next meeting again. This is the second time that things have been moved onward, and that if this is what's happening, I mean, if you're just trying to play us along here, to move us along, to say that we'll quit and that we're going to forget about what's going on, I'm here to tell you that we're not.
Okay.
We have a lot of support of the community in our petition, as you've seen. And people are asking questions because they don't understand what is going on, because they have been uninformed, I should say, of what's happening. We'd like to know what's going on, and we just keep on getting it put from meeting to meeting. What do you have to say?
Well, the meeting is on the 19th of October, which is intended to be a public engagement, public information meeting, will reiterate any information that we have at this point on the project, and also will encompass things that come up over the next 2 to 3 weeks as we approach the 19th of October. So that would be, I think, the best opportunity for people in a face-to-face forum to read or to hear what's happening with the project, notwithstanding what's available on the town's website. Mr. Hyde, how would you describe the information content that's available on the website?
Well, the town has, the course of the solar project, made an effort to disclose public documents. So there are a number of studies on the website now having to do with the identification of wetlands in the area, the load capacity of the grid to accept energy at different points, and how that would inform the choice of a route for the service corridor. So there's a fair bit of information out there on the website now. I think it's also been conveyed in some cases directly to some of the individuals who have written us in response to their inquiries, but obviously those are not publicly shared. And all of that would be articulated to the meeting on the 19th, or the public open house on the 19th, in addition to the report that was requested tonight, having to do with the correspondence from Peter and Mary, which would also be one of the exhibits at the upcoming open house. So basically all of the information that's been disclosed publicly to that date will be presented, and council and staff and the project managers will be on site to discuss at that time. So that's the nature of the information.
Does the project manager though have any discussions with the landowners and dealing with our personal requests? Like, we understand the solar project and we are totally for solar. We agree with all the environmental savings, the impacts that it'll adhere to and help. However, is that just going to, we attended personally the first one, we had spoke with you. Is that going to be of similar, we're gonna have people outside there to discuss the full project as a whole and the cost saving up until 2025, 7%, whatever, or is it going to be able to, all the landowners that are affected, will they have time to discuss on how the plan is of the town for the roadway, the power line, the cutting, the clearing, the hauling away, Like, we have had none of that.
No record, no amounts of money have been sent out to say that, yes, by expropriating our land, this is gonna save us X amount of dollars. We have no idea. I mean, you're gonna put a road in, it's gonna cost you so many $100,000, minimum of $30 a foot. I know that for a fact. I mean, you're gonna put a power line in, and even after Fiona, which the government says, well, we gotta mitigate all this stuff by putting the power lines in, why can't you bury the line?
That's a bad discussion.
Hasn't been discussed, right? None of this has been discussed. You've made a point of putting the power solar farm in a place that's farthest away from the substation as possibly can get in a town. And yet now you're trying to save money by going the shortest route to get to it.
Mr. Hyde.
So I guess there were a number of different questions there, but to the first one about, what is the avenue for the property owners? I know you've received correspondence from me over the past year, and I'm always happy to have a conversation. We've been treated those conversations through that correspondence. Most recently, our correspondence advised the property owners that we have retained Turner Drake to do the valuation, and that Nigel Turner is available, but also he hasn't heard from any of you, so he will be
Oh, I think it's.
specifically reaching out.
Reaching out
Yeah,
to
so he will be reaching out in the coming
Never
weeks. So the letter indicated that he was available, but also would be reaching out. So he hasn't heard from you, but he will be reaching out in the coming weeks. And those conversations are a neutral process. They're part of the evaluation process. So he's going to discuss how you feel the land should be valued based on your use of the land. That's what he's been engaged to do. If you want to have a conversation about construction methods having to do with the road or anything like that, I'm always available to have those conversations. I'm happy to hear from any of you in that regard. But as far as the process of placing a price, which you've asked for, that really is a neutral process. So we don't set the price. Now we are willing and have been for the past 2 years since we initially reached out to the property owners to entertain proposals in terms of the price, like what would be acceptable to the property owners. The town remains absolutely open to hearing from you in that regard. And I'm available, happy to meet with you at any time if you like, and we can talk about it in more detail. To the second part about how does the information, the rationale that council has for making this decision relate specifically to property owners. The focus on that has definitely been, with the exception of responding to communication, on putting out that information to the general community as opposed to specifically to the property owners. So there has been a fair bit of public information on the rationale, and we have responded to letters from the property owners with specific rationale. But ultimately, council's decision isn't being made purely on the basis of cost in terms of the service corridor direction. That obviously is a factor, and we've articulated the cost savings involved when council made the decision on January 7th of this year to pursue that route. We articulated the cost savings involved. But there are other factors, including the capacity of the grid to carry that load and environmental considerations where we're trying to minimize impact on wetlands or cutting. So all of that will be, I guess, articulated again at the open house. And specifically with respect to some of the alternative sites, you mentioned this one's a long way from the substation. The report that was just requested earlier tonight to Peter Redden's correspondence is pretty much entirely about alternative sites and why was this the selected site. So that will also be, but it will be aimed publicly at the general community and at Peter, and not specifically the property owners.
Right.
But if you have specific to your own property questions, I would highly encourage you to either talk to me, or if it's about the valuation, talk to Nigel when he reaches out, or if you want to reach out to him, he gave you the contact information, because he's not working on our behalf, he's working on behalf of a fair process for both the property owners and the town. And at the end of the day, we haven't determined to proceed through an expropriation. We'd love to proceed through a negotiated agreement. But at the end of the day, we're going to need to proceed in order to be able to bring the facility online. So that's still a conversation between us. And again, I'm happy to have it in private if at any time if you'd like to.
Can you tell me, is the road planned to be an open road to the solar station from over?
Oh, if you
I
like,
just think I had to check in with the chair. So
I think the road is supposed to be gated.
yes, yeah. So I just wanted your permission.
And
to
locked.
answer.
And the property owners would have a key to that lock
We had heard that month.
to
a
get
year ago.
access
We
to
had heard
that
a
road.
change of that.
So yeah, no, definitely the intention is that the gate would be locked at, well, the current gate, there is a gate now. A new one would be, slightly more functional gate would be installed and it would be locked. The town property owners would have access to it. Obviously, RPS is one of the property owners, probably the most commonly using it because it's where their gate currently is located. But the other property owners would have access. And there's also a commitment to have at each property a pull off, like, you know, so that you could, if you were to choose to use the road to access your property, pull off the road to access your property. What you do from there, if you want to, you know, build on that with a little logging road or anything, that's up to the individuals, but you would have the opportunity to access the property.
For our road, we're gonna need to, because it goes through our property.
Yes, so sorry, so across or in, depending on the nature of the individual property, yeah.
Well, I look forward to the 19th and
Yeah.
hopefully that somebody will come up with and look at all these proposals that we've worked hard on to put forth to you.
Mhm.
And also even the one about burying the line, I will mention that again. And I will mention that 19th, if this happens to go through, that you are going to put a road or a line to our property. Yeah, I will stand by that one, my figures. Hello,
Hey, do you mind if I say something?
you go ahead.
I appreciate you folks coming, and I think the one thing that I would like to reiterate in all these processes, we as councillors are here to represent you. You elected us to represent you, and that's what we've done in the process. It might not feel that that's what's happening, but that in all the deliberations we've had, I don't have an entity called town that I want to represent. In fact, if somebody knows me very well, I'm anti-establishment in many ways. And so in all the decisions we're trying to make is to make what's for the best of the town. And so if, like Sia said, if there's any issues that you need to raise, feel free to raise it with us. Feel free to communicate with us directly. And in many ways, the information that, from my perspective, that you get needs to be balanced, because I've talked to folks in the community who actually have a totally different view of what the process has been than what I've been involved in. And when you ask them, okay, where did you got that information? It's not very credible information. They've seen something on Facebook, they've seen something on a website, and they've decided that's the.
I think that's the problem, though. I think there hasn't been a lot of open discussions around how the town and what they're doing with the solar project,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of misconceived things, and we're going around door to door, as my husband and others said too. They had no idea where it was even being put
Yeah.
and how it was being accessed. And you can see by the number of people that signed the petition, they did not know what was happening.
Yeah.
All they seen was solar, save us so many %, yay, with the environment, wonderful, all good things. But they didn't know in the end what was being discussed and how it was being placed and where. And the actual cost, they didn't know. Versus the payout at the end. Yeah, okay.
No, we look forward to seeing you on the 19th.
I'll be
Yeah.
back.
And
I'll make the drive again.
by all means,
So that's work now.
drop in or have a chat with Mr. Hyde as well if you have any specific questions.
I will be back.
Yep.
Thank you for
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, there's been no questions from.
No questions? Okay, thank you. No questions, no one's left in the gallery. We will then entertain a motion to go in camera. Seconded by Deputy Mayor. All in favor?
Could you please?
We're going in camera.
We're going in camera.
Pardon me?
Could you please list the?
They
reasons
are
for going?
MGA 22 2F, 2A, and 2E.
Those are litigation or potential litigation.
A is for the acquisition, sale, lease, and security of municipal property. And 22 2E is contract negotiations, and the deputy mayor had a personnel issue that he wanted to discuss.
Thank you.
Okay?
All right, so this will take a minute to actually stop. now
Yep.
that I'm stopping.
Hey, time for